Hey guys, tonight we're headed deep into the echoing halls of the Forbidden City, right as dusk folds into shadow and a soft, chirping hum rises like a lullaby against the thick silence. Imagine polished red columns stretching toward the sky, golden roofs glowing in the last rays of sunlight, and a sound, faint but persistent, like nature whispering a secret through the silk curtains of an emperor's chamber. You're in the heart of Beijing, but not the one you know. This is the Qing dynasty, maybe the Ming before it. Either way, your slippers pad softly over stone tiles as you pass towering walls and watchful guards. You're not a tourist. You're here to sleep. And your guide tonight? A cricket. Not a metaphor, an actual cricket. Now, I know what you're thinking. How does one of the most powerful human beings in history fall asleep to the tune of Bay Bug? And more importantly, why? That's what we're about to find out. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your city and local time in the comments. Love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You turn the corner into the Emperor's private quarters, and something immediately feels different. Not heavy or ominous, just thick with stillness. This is where power sleeps, and nothing disturbs that process. Not even the wind. But tonight, there's that chirping again. Persistent, rhythmic, oddly soothing. You glance toward a small, intricate wooden cage suspended by a red silk thread, hanging just above the Emperor's pillow. Inside, no jade, no incense, just a cricket. Not the kind you find leaping around your garage. This one is hand-picked, bred for tone, fed special herbs, and rested in a polished cage made of bamboo slats, so thin and precise they could double as harps. These were not random pests. These were the elite singers of the insect world. Historians still argue whether the practice began with emperors themselves or filtered upward from the common people who kept crickets for luck and amusement. But once the custom reached the inner court, it transformed. What was once a curious peasant's toy became a curated instrument of imperial rest. You sit now in the corner of the room, watching the emperor's form under layers of silk, perfectly still, breathing slow. He doesn't hear the silence. He listens for that tiny rhythm, one so constant and clean, it becomes a kind of internal metronome, lulling him past the worries of war, betrayal, and governance. The guards outside know better than to interrupt. They've seen what happens when a cricket stops chirping too soon, an omen, a bad sign, maybe even sabotage. You wouldn't think a cricket could be a political liability, but then again, you're not living under layers of ancient Chinese court tradition, where symbolism was a second language. There are scrolls somewhere in the imperial archives detailing proper cricket care, not written by farmers, but by scholars. Crickets had dietary recommendations, sleep schedules, emotional guidelines. Some emperors demanded updates on their cricket's mood. Imagine the royal assistant sweating bullets because the cricket looked slightly irritable this morning. But if you close your eyes now, you can feel it. The pull of the sound, soft, repetitive, like the brushing of silk sleeves or the gentle knocking of bamboo wind chimes. It doesn't command attention, it replaces it. And maybe that's the secret. In a life filled with command, authority, and ceremony, the emperor found serenity in something utterly indifferent to all that. A cricket didn't bow. It didn't flatter. It just sang. There's a legend told in hushed tones about Emperor Xuandi of the Ming Dynasty. Supposedly, he once delayed a war meeting because his favorite cricket was molting, and he didn't want to disturb the process. "Let the world wait," he said. "Sleep comes before swords." Did he actually say that? Historians roll their eyes. But you kind of hope it's true, don't you? Crickets in these times weren't just bedtime buddies. They were talismans, living amulets of balance and harmony. Their chirps were believed to align with a natural order, echoing the rhythms of the universe itself. Miss a note, and the cosmos might wobble. You tiptoe deeper into the chamber, past a painted screen, and find a lacquered box filled with spare cricket cages. Some are oval-shaped gourds, carved with stunning detail, others shaped like pagodas, or miniature scroll cases. One even has tiny bells that ring when the cricket moves. Each one is a cradle for a sound. It's funny, really. While Roman emperors were throwing gladiators into coliseums and European kings were plotting invasions, here in the East, a man with unimaginable power was lying in silence, hoping a cricket wouldn't fall asleep before he did. You lean against a column and let yourself drift. It's working, you realize. The simplicity of it all, the hush between chirps, the coolness of stone, and the sense that even now, in the center of a vast and sleepless empire, rest is something that comes in. Small, whispering waves. You're still in the emperor's chamber, and the chirping continues soft, steady, almost invisible. But now your eyes drift toward that cage. It's no random thing. The design is deliberate, a masterwork of lacquer and wood that took weeks to craft. A tiny architectural miracle built for a bug. Each cage is a story. You crouch closer, inspecting one of them. It's no bigger than your hand, and yet it's decorated with mother-of-pearl inlays and etched with tiny dragons coiling around the edges. The door is a sliding panel held in place by a carved jade pin. Inside, the cricket perches on a straw mat beside a speck of food paste and a water droplet nestled in a polished pebble. It's a luxury suite by Bug standards. In ancient China. Cages like these weren't just tools, they were art. Craftsmen dedicated their lives to building the perfect acoustic home. Some cages had compartments to hold multiple crickets. Others had hollow bamboo stalks that acted like resonators. You'd think you were looking at a display in a modern design museum. But no, this was just part of bedtime prep in the royal court. What you're witnessing now isn't a weird exception, it was a widespread practice. By the Tang Dynasty, noble households were already commissioning cricket cages as seasonal gifts. By the time you hit the Song and Ming dynasties, the emperor wasn't just collecting these insects. He was showing them off, like you might show someone your rare vinyl or that one perfectly tuned playlist you insist makes a difference during long drives. And oh, how it made a difference. Imagine you're the emperor again. It's been a long day of ceremonial bows, reading court scrolls, and pretending your cousin isn't scheming for your throne. You lie back and stare at the ceiling. The night air is still, and then chirp, a gentle vibrato, another chirp, slightly higher in tone, then another, a subtle harmony, a chorus in miniature, your personal orchestra. But here's a fun detail. Ancient Chinese scholars ranked cricket songs. Literally, they had a scale, like a musical grading system, to evaluate pitch, clarity, rhythm. And if your cricket hit all the notes, well, congratulations. That was your VIP sleeper dot. Now, here's the twist. These cages weren't just decorative, they were portable. Some officials carried them on long trips, hanging from saddle hooks or resting them in pouches. Imagine traveling across muddy roads in war-torn provinces just to arrive at your next post, unroll your mat, and hang your tiny cricket speaker beside you. Some habits just stick, but there's more. Some cages were seasonal. Yes, seasonal. In spring, gourds were often used because they stayed cooler. In winter, bamboo provided warmth. And during monsoon season, you might switch to a clay-bottomed cage to reduce vibration. Welcome to ancient bug-based interior design. Historians still argue whether the elaborate nature of the cages influenced the value of the cricket, or vice versa. Did people grow obsessed with the cage first, or was it the cricket song that made all the fuss worthwhile? You suspect, deep down, that both played their part. After all, it's never just the sound, it's how the sound is framed. You close your eyes now, and try to hear it the way the emperor might. Beyond the noise, beyond the tone. What does a cricket song mean when everything else in your life is dictated, planned, and ceremonial? Maybe it's freedom, maybe it's randomness, maybe it's something ancient and eternal, a sound that no amount of gold or jade could buy, only coax. You move along a quiet corridor now, led by the soft glow of lanterns. You pass the quarters of the consorts. A few crickets chirp here too, but they're softer, tucked away behind ornate silk partitions. You wonder if they're all listening to the same rhythm, scattered through the palace like stars, connected by invisible threads of sound. Suddenly you remember a little-known tidbit. It was once considered extremely lucky to hear a cricket chirp. On the night of your birthday, some courtiers would try to schedule cricket placement for that exact event. Imagine bribing a servant just to smuggle a singing insect under a lacquered screen. There's a rumor that one empress kept a journal of her favorite chirps, describing them with poetry. One chirps like falling pearls on porcelain. Another, like the sigh of a cloud. Are those exaggerations? Maybe, but also kind of perfect, aren't they? You sit now in the far end of the chamber where old cricket cages are stacked like dusty tomes. You reach toward one and brush away a layer of silk. The craftsmanship here is absurd. Every slat carved by hand, every corner sanded down with such precision that it makes you forget this entire thing is about a bug. And yet, it's not just a bug. Not here. Not in the silence of an emperor's night. One small chirp cuts through. The air like a memory made audible. You feel your breath slow. Your mind loosens its grip. The weight of the palace, the hierarchy, the expectations, the whispers behind every folding screen melts away in that one persistent, perfect sound. You've never thought about sleep like this before. Not as escape, but as harmony. Not as ending, but as restoration. You lie back on the floor mats and let the wooden bars cast striped shadows across your face. The cricket sings on. You don't need a lullaby. You've got a living one. The moon has shifted slightly above the palace roofline now, and you can feel the night deepening, thickening, like warm broth poured slowly into a bowl. Still, the cricket sings, and it's not alone. Down the corridor, another joins in. Slightly. Lower pitch, a little raspier, and then another. It's like listening to the Emperor's private mixtape, hand-picked, hand-fed, perfectly tuned. You follow the sound to a smaller chamber tucked beside the hall of mental cultivation, a room that once hosted late-night thoughts and even later-night snacks. But tonight, it's full of tiny cages, each with its own proud occupant. You wouldn't know it from a glance, but you've stumbled into the Imperial Cricket Collection. And not just any collection, this is a curated lullaby library of the Emperor himself. Each cage here is labeled, not with numbers or tags, but with nicknames. One is called Little Thunder, another Moon Singer, a third simply number 9, which feels almost suspiciously modern. These crickets aren't just insects, they're performers, each one prized for a particular tone, a vibrational frequency that hits just right after a long day of ruling. Everything the keepers, yes, there were dedicated cricket keepers, knew exactly which sound suited which mood. Trouble in court? Go with low hummer. Ceremony fatigue? Time for rainfall tone. And when everything felt balanced in the rare golden moments of stillness, that's when they played Night Drum a slow, deliberate chirper whose rhythm could hypnotize even a paranoid monarch. Historians still argue whether these naming conventions reflected actual tonal differences or were just fanciful imperial whims. But when you sit here now, in the glow of oil lamps and the murmur of distant guards, it feels real. It feels precise. It feels like every detail was deeply felt and fiercely defended. You try to imagine the selection process that the Emperor reclines, robes loose, eyelids heavy. A keeper approaches, bows silently, and presents 2 cages. He gently taps each one, coaxing a chirp from inside. One sounds bright and sharp, like a bead striking jade. The other, low and trembling, like an old man, clearing his throat. The Emperor tilts his head, then gestures silently toward the second. The keeper bows again and places it near the bed. This was not casual. This was curation. This was sonic therapy. Centuries before anyone used that term, it's oddly comforting. To know that even emperors had playlists. Even emperors needed to downshift before drifting off. Their minds, always spinning with diplomacy, legacy, betrayal, and family politics, needed something repetitive, calming, and small. Something that didn't demand attention, only allowed for its gentle arrival. But not all emperors were passive. Listeners, oh no. Some became obsessed. Take Emperor Qiaomong. You may know him for his poetry. his vast collection of jade carvings, or his long reign during the Qing dynasty. But behind the scenes, cricket fanboy. He personally ordered cricket hunts in the countryside, demanded seasonal cage upgrades, and once reportedly scolded a servant for presenting a common-sounding specimen. There's a fantastic side note, totally fringe, probably apocryphal, that he once commissioned a miniature opera, performed entirely for his favorite crickets. Entertainment. No human audience, just a bug and its court. Whether it's true or not, you kind of wish it were Dot in this same era. Cricket collecting became a courtly hobby. Princes, officials, and scholars started trading crickets like Pokemon. Not even joking. One 18th century manuscript lists traits like length of chirp, clarity of vibration, and obedience to stimulation, whatever that last one means. You wonder if someone was poking the poor thing with a feather until it agreed to perform. Open any drawer in this room and you'll find records. Tiny scrolls and bamboo slips detailing feeding schedules, molting patterns, even preferred cage materials. You begin to realize this wasn't just a hobby. It was a science, a ritual, a bedtime necessity. Crickets weren't merely heard. They were managed. Some emperors reportedly kept logs of nightly chirps, marking down tone shifts like weather patterns. If the sound changed drastically, it was taken as a sign. Maybe the heavens were displeased. Maybe an advisor was hiding something, or maybe the grain harvest would fail. The chirp wasn't just a sound, it was an omen. A mood ring made of wings. And then there's the spiritual layer. Some believed that crickets had souls that traveled between worlds in their sleep, that they dreamed for us, that their music opened gateways to more restful sleep. It's a comforting thought. While you snore away, your insect companion is whispering dreams into the night air on your behalf. You sit quietly now, listening to the competing chirps. They don't clash. Somehow they weave. One rises as another falls. Another pauses, letting its neighbor take the rhythm. It's not quite a song, but it's something else, something older, something steady. You realize the emperor isn't trying to escape noise. He's trying to tune the world. Everything outside these walls is politics, deception, and grand ceremony. But in here, it's six-legged lullabies and soft-spoken nature. Simplicity, but structured. And that's the secret. You don't need silence to sleep. You need a pattern, something familiar, something just unpredictable enough to hold your attention until it releases it. That's what the crickets are doing, reeling you in, lulling you under. You lean back, watching the shadows ripple across. The walls, the cages sway gently from silk threads. The chirps continue steady, loyal, hypnotic. And all around you. The greatest empire on earth dreams softly to the rhythm of something so small you'd normally brush it off your porch. Not here, not tonight. The rhythm of the night continues, but now something changes. You hear a different kind of sound, still a chirp, but sharper, more urgent, almost aggressive. You follow it down a quieter passage, one reserved not for rest, but for spectacle. There's a chamber here, smaller, yet charged with energy. The lanterns burn a little brighter. The silence carries anticipation. And as you peer inside, you find something that should feel ridiculous, but instead feels oddly sacred. Two crickets. One small wooden arena. Welcome to the imperial pastime of cricket fighting. Yes, cricket fighting. The sleepy lullabies of the night have a wilder, more raucous sibling. And it wasn't just a peasant diversion. No, this was a full-blown palace ritual. You sit cross-legged at the edge of a low, lacquered table. And for you is a tiny pit, surrounded by an audience of scholars, attendants, and high-ranking officials who really should be doing other things. Two cricket handlers lean forward, each carefully coaxing their tiny warrior into position with the precision of jewelers. The combatants are not randomly chosen. They are trained, fed particular herbs, measured by weight and leg strength. This is not chaos, it's sport. And for some emperors, it was downright obsession. There's a documented case from the Song dynasty where Emperor Hizong, already known for his artistic sensibilities, kept a cricket registry where he ranked fighters by win-loss record. He even drafted royal decrees around training schedules and performance bonuses. For bugs, the match begins. At first, nothing. Just a lot of antenna wiggling and dramatic posturing. You'd think they were bluffing, but then snap. One lunges. A flurry of tiny legs and scraping wings. The other counters with a kick. It's quick, barely a second, but the room erupts in hushed gasps. Bets are quietly exchanged, though no. Money is shown. This is the palace. After all, cricket fighting wasn't simply for entertainment. It was a metaphor, an expression of key energy, spirit, balance. Watching two small creatures locked in elegant combat mirrored the tension of the imperial court itself. Silent rivalries, outbursts of power, swift consequences. Historians still argue whether these matches were genuinely respected or simply tolerated as a quirky royal indulgence. But you can tell by the reverence in the room, these fights mattered. Even the arenas were special, often carved from sandalwood, lined with velvet, and surrounded by miniature stands, complete with painted scrolls and nameplates. Some even had curtains that could be drawn back for dramatic reveals, because of course they did. And let's not pretend it ended in violence. Oh no, these weren't duels to the death. In fact, great care was taken to prevent serious harm. If a cricket retreated, it was considered a loss. The match was over. Champions were praised, losers were comforted, and the best part? Retired fighters were given names and allowed to live out their days in pampered solitude. Imagine being a palace cricket, sparring in the evening and then sleeping in a silk-lined cage with cucumber slices and dewdrops for hydration. You've lived better than most humans in the outer provinces. Here's the fringe tidbit. Some emperors believed that a cricket who had never fought was somehow spiritually incomplete. That without challenge, the song lacked depth. So yes, even lullaby crickets were sometimes sent into the ring, not to dominate, but to experience. It wasn't cruelty. It was character development. You rise now, stepping away from the arena as the handlers gently scoop their crickets back into resting cases. The energy softens. The lanterns dim. The court returns to its calm. You're left with a strange impression. that even in rest there's motion, that the crickets, these tiny singers and sparring spirits, lived lives of startling complexity, and in some strange way the emperor saw himself in them, powerful, fragile, and completely dependent on his environment. A little deeper into the palace, you pass a balcony overlooking the inner garden. The trees sway gently. A breeze slides through bamboo chimes. Somewhere below, more crickets sing, not fighters, not performers, just ordinary bugs doing what they've done for thousands of years. It's easy to forget how something so small could carry so much meaning. But here, where emperors once ruled by moonlight and monarchs measured time by wing vibrations, nothing was too small to matter. You settle now on a garden bench just outside the Chamber of Matches and listen again. The fighter's chirp is different, bolder, maybe even proud. Not necessarily louder, but more certain. It has purpose, like it's telling a story you're not quite fluent in. And maybe that's the point. The crickets weren't just sleep aids. They were avatars, mirrors. They reflected the emperor's moods, matched his energies, echoed his fears. And whether they were singing him to sleep or dancing in battle, they were always present. Constant companions in a world that trusted no one. You lean back. Let that idea settle. In a palace where betrayal whispered through every silk wall and trust was thinner than rice paper, the most loyal voice was the one that came from a tiny, winged singer, unguarded, unfazed, and always on time. You wake where maybe you never really slept from your perch beside the garden bench. The air is cooler now. Still, a velvet calm wraps around the forbidden city like a well-worn robe. But something's changed in the distance. There's movement. Quiet but deliberate. You glance toward a covered walkway and catch the flutter of robes officials, servants, and a man in a slightly more ornate tunic. He's holding something small, delicate, wrapped in silk. Curiosity piqued. You follow, down winding corridors, through the north gate of the imperial garden, into a more discreet, more shadowed space. This isn't for ceremony or show. This is the marketplace behind the throne, a private little corner of the empire where whispers become currency and crickets become treasure. You've arrived at the imperial cricket trade. Yes, trade. It turns out those nighttime singers weren't just collected. They were bought, sold, and bartered in a system so vast it rivaled the jade and silk industries. Tiny chirping bugs, cradled in hollow gourds, quietly moved through the palace like contraband perfumes. You find yourself standing beside a low bamboo table covered with lacquered boxes. Inside each, a cricket swaddled like a jewel. The man in the ornate tunic bows low before a high-ranking official and begins unwrapping one. He lifts it gently, lets it chirp just once. The sound is sharp, clean, with a slight warble at the tail end. The official smiles faintly. A nod. A coin slips silently onto the table. This isn't a flea market. It's a black tie auction for bugs. During the Ming and Qing dynasties, the cricket trade reached truly bizarre levels of prestige. Merchants bred them like racehorses, tracking bloodlines, feeding them custom diets of millet and beans, even massaging their wings with goose feathers to improve tone quality. Yes, that's a real thing. and then like rare vinyl collectors. In hipster cafes, these traders named the strains: Mid-Autumn Siren, Jade Tone, No 3, Chrysanthemum Rumble. The weirder the name, the higher the value. If your cricket's chirp resembled the wind rustling through pine needles, jackpot. Cricket prices could soar. And we're not talking pocket change here. A top-performing chirper could cost more than a silk robe or a silver hairpin. And for emperors or nobles desperate for rest or bragging rights, it was worth every copper coin. Historians still argue whether these price records are exaggerated. Some sources claim a single cricket once sold for the equivalent of several oxen. Others say that's palace myth. But when you watch the way these men move silent, respectful, almost reverent, you believe it. And just like every good trade, there were secrets. Some traders doused their crickets in ginger mist to sharpen their song. Others fed them fermented berries to enhance volume. There were even cricket frauds, little wooden shakers stuffed with chirp recordings to fool buyers. You imagine a scandal. A royal advisor caught presenting a fake chirper to the emperor, only to discover it squeaks when tapped. Not a great way to end your week, but the weirdest tidbit of all. Some people rented crickets. Yep, too poor to buy one outright? No problem. Rent your ideal chirper for the season. Sleep like an emperor. Return it in autumn. Hopefully alive, you wander now into the garden edge, where a few lower-tier attendants gather around the fire. One has a small gourd hanging from his belt. You nod, and he opens it for you. Inside, a cricket twitching its legs, warming itself on a pinch of moss. He taps the gourd gently. Chirp Dot, it's not perfect. A little raspy, but honest. The others? Listen quietly, Dot. This is the other side of the trade. The quiet collectors. Not emperors, not traders. Just people who love the sound, the rhythm, the companionship. Maybe they don't have cages made of jade and sandalwood. Maybe their crickets sleep in gourds and matchboxes. But the comfort is the same. Dot. One man leans forward and says something you'll remember. We don't buy crickets for what they are. We buy them for how they help us hear ourselves. You carry that with you as you walk the garden paths, lit now by moonlight alone. The forbidden city, for all its towering gates and golden dragons, is not a place of noise. It's a place of whispers, the kind you only notice when everything else stops. And in those pauses, the crickets chirp. Always back in the emperor's chamber, a new cage is being prepared. The old cricket honored, but tired is gently removed, placed in a rest gourd. The fresh arrival, purchased just this morning for a price no one will speak aloud, is introduced to its new home. There's a slight flutter of wings. Then, tentatively, a chirp, a low, rich tone, full of confidence. The attendants nod. Success. You're starting to understand now. The emperor isn't just buying sound. He's buying serenity. A sense that even in a world of shifting loyalties and silent daggers, some things can be relied upon. A rhythm, a note, a voice that never lies. The chirp continues. And once again, the palace begins to sleep. You step back into the palace courtyard just before dawn, the edges of the forbidden city dusted in lavender gray. The palace isn't awake, yet not officially, but there's subtle movement in the air. Servants lighting lanterns, soft whispers from the kitchens, and outside the crimson walls, far beyond the royal gates, another kind of movement altogether. You follow it, through side gates, past half-sleeping guards, through a vine-wrapped door that opens into the outskirts of the city. Here, among the straw roofs and weathered carts, a different cricket world stirs, a world of mud, dew, and bamboo baskets. Welcome to the domain of the cricket hunters. And no, you're not imagining it. These were real professions. In dynastic China, especially during the Tang, Song, and well into the Ming eras, entire families made their living tracking down the perfect chirp. You walk now beside one of them, an elderly man with a burlap sack tied around his back and a gleam in his eye that says he's heard more bugs than bedtime stories. His gear is minimal: a bamboo tube, a thin stick with horsehair bristles, a lantern with green silk to soften the glow. His steps are calculated, patient. This isn't a sprint. It's a quiet ritual. You crouch with him beside a rice field. The sun still hasn't broken the horizon, but the world begins to whisper soft rustles in the grass, the occasional drip from a leaf, and then, almost like a held breath being released, chirp. The man freezes. Then, slowly, he moves toward the sound. You follow, holding your breath. 1 foot wrong and the cricket is gone. This is stealth work, listening work. He kneels, parts a few tall blades, and there it is, a cricket, not flashy. Just a dull brown insect rubbing its legs together like a percussionist warming up. But this one has tone. A deep, consistent buzz with a slight rise at the end. The man nods, like a musician hearing a perfect note. He uses the horsehair brush to gently nudge the cricket into his bamboo tube. No harm. No fuss. A clean, respectful capture. Turns out, cricket hunting was more than a trade. It was an art. The best hunters knew not just where to find them, but when. After a light rain? Excellent. Late autumn dusk? Even better. Too early in the day, and they won't chirp. Too cold, and they go silent. Historians still argue whether cricket hunting developed from earlier insect-collecting traditions or emerged as a direct response to imperial demand. But one thing's certain: it became a subculture all its own. Hunters had codes, favored techniques, even passed down secret bug maps across generations, scraps of rice paper with locations marked by hand. Based on decades of field work, you walk now through a makeshift village market where hunters gather before sunrise to exchange catches. You'd expect chaos, but instead there's a hush of reverence. The crickets are tested before trade, each coaxed into chirping, while others gather around like wine critics swirling glasses. He has the throat of a gibbon, someone says. You raise an eyebrow. Apparently that's a compliment. Another shakes his head, listening to a higher-pitched chirp. Too sharp. No echo. Should keep you awake, not lull you down. It's amazing, this insect, this tiny thing, how much judgment, expertise, and subtlety surrounds it. Cricket culture at this level isn't about sleep or wealth. It's about respect for nature, for sound, for stillness. A man approaches you with a woven box. He opens it to reveal 6 crickets in individual compartments, each with a small placard carved from bone, etched in fine brush script. You read them aloud. Dream Walker, Echo of Plum, 4-wing singer. You ask what they cost. He shrugs. Not for sale. These are for my family's rest. The idea lands soft but solid. For many families, a good cricket wasn't just soothing, it was sacred, like a family heirloom with legs. There's a strange, fringe tale you hear from one of the hunters, a man who once claimed he could hear the future in his cricket's song. Supposedly, he predicted 3 weddings, a house fire, and the birth of twin boys, all by changes in chirp tone. Was he a mystic, a lucky guesser, or just someone who listened too closely for too long? You'll never know, but it fits the vibe out here. These people don't just hear crickets, they listen to them. Actively, obsessively, patiently. And now, so do you. You head back toward the palace as the sun peeks over the tiled roofs, casting long golden streaks across the courtyard. One of the hunters walks with you for a while, then gently places a cricket in your hand. It's calm, cool, silent for now. But later, when the evening returns, it will sing, and you'll know what that means now, not just the sound itself, but the hunt behind it, the waiting, the stories, the precision. The art. You hand it off to a palace keeper who smiles and tucks it into a silk pouch. Tonight, that cricket might lull an emperor to sleep. Or just maybe you. By now, the palace has shaken off its sleep, but not its stillness. You wander through the inner halls as sunlight bleeds through the lattice windows, casting golden squares across the floor. The crickets, housed in their delicate cages, are quieter during the day, but they still hum softly, occasionally trilling like a string plucked by an invisible finger. You're not alone in noticing this. A narrow corridor opens into a study, its walls lined with scrolls and bamboo slips. Here, the scholars work robed men with ink-stained fingers and thoughtful frowns. They're not cataloging taxes or tracing military history. They're listening. One adjusts a cage. Another takes notes. A third closes his eyes and hums back a tone, trying to match the pitch. You've entered a world of sonic cartography. This is where cricket songs are mapped. It sounds ridiculous at first, but then you look at the parchment. What you see isn't a melody or a Western-style music staff. It's something older, simpler, columns and curves rising and falling like tiny waves. Each mark denotes duration, tone, tempo, even pauses. It's not a song sheet. It's a portrait of sound. In the Tang Dynasty, the first serious efforts to record cricket songs began, not just for posterity, but for prediction. Scholars believe that each cricket chirped with seasonal precision, and by tracking those patterns, you could understand deeper cosmic rhythms. Some even drew parallels to celestial charts. As stars map the sky, one famous scribe wrote, so too do crickets map the breath of the earth. You sit beside a scholar now. He's working on a long scroll titled Autumn Tones of the Eastern Field. With a fine-tipped brush, he draws a soft spiral and labels it. 3-note trill, dusk, light breeze. His handwriting is tight, almost meditative. You ask him if each cricket has a unique voice. He nods. The same way no two bamboo stalks bend in the wind quite the same. Then he pauses. But they belong to the same wind. It's poetic, and also surprisingly technical. These scholars weren't just poets. They were proto-acousticians. They experimented with variables, container size, cage materials, room temperature, to observe changes in tone. Some built cricket acoustics boxes lined with bronze or ceramic, designed to enhance or filter specific frequencies. You lean into one such contraption, a curved wooden cylinder with a cricket inside. The sound is richer, deeper. It vibrates in your chest. Historians still argue whether this work was considered serious science or just courtly amusement. But records show emperors commissioning entire volumes on cricket tones. Some kept seasonal chirp calendars, marking changes in tone as harvests came and went. And it wasn't just about sleep anymore. These songs were believed to indicate harmony or imbalance in the empire itself. If the crickets sang too loudly during a drought, an omen. If they fell silent during festival nights, a warning. You look again at the scrolls, and you see names not just for the insects, but for the tones themselves. One is called Wind/Moonlight. Another, Bell of the Ancients. There's one simply titled Home. There's a story in each dot, and the most curious part, no one agreed on the perfect tone. One scholar might favor a high, clear trill, another a low, rolling buzz. Yet another preferred a disjointed chirp with pauses that mimicked falling rain. Cricket song was, and remains, deeply subjective. But isn't that how sleep works too? You sit back and let the room wash over you. Brushes scratching parchment, crickets chirping, the occasional slosh of ink in a pot. A stillness, but not silence, that makes you think. What if we all had sleep? Patterns mapped like this? What if someone tracked your breathing, your midnight turns, your dreams, and gave them names? Maybe they'd call your snore a low winter drum, or your early morning sigh a sparrow in fog. One scholar leans over and shows you a tiny gourd. Not a cricket cage this time, but a chirp filter. It's carved with spiral holes designed to shape the sound as it exits. He holds it to your ear and gently blows across the opening. The chirp that comes through is distorted, ghostly, softer, fainter, perfect for lighter sleepers. There's even a cricket tuning tool on the table, a hollow. Reed used to mimic rival chirps, prompting the real cricket to sing louder in response. Some crickets are shy, he says. They need encouragement. You think about that. The idea that even a cricket, when heard and mimicked, might sing its loudest. Its oddly human. As the morning sun climbs higher, the scholars begin to pack away their brushes. One rolls up a scroll and slides it into a case marked Emperor's Selections, Year of the Earth Rabbit. Another blows gently into a cage, like a lullaby in reverse. You leave quietly, taking the rhythm with you. The idea of mapping sound, not just to capture it, but to understand the world through it, lingers. You didn't expect to find philosophy in a bug's wing beat. But here you are, wondering what your own sleep would sound like if someone wrote it down. Probably something gentle, probably something with pauses, something that rises and falls like breath. Afternoon light now filters through silk blinds, casting amber streaks on palace stone and warming your skin like the gentle press of a quilt. The bustle has softened. You move slowly through a side hall where the echoes of courtly business finally give way to something stranger, something more mystical. This is the wing where logic turns soft and superstition hums just beneath the surface. You pause outside a chamber decorated not in gold, but in deep indigo and pine green colors, associated with balance and mystery. Inside, incense curls in lazy tendrils above a low altar. A few court mystics are seated cross-legged, eyes closed. One is humming. Not unlike the crickets themselves, this is where the palace kept its cricket whisperers. Yes, that was a real thing. These men, and sometimes women, weren't just handlers or collectors. They were tuned to insect energy the way an herbalist is tuned to plants, or a monk to breath. You sit quietly along the perimeter, trying not to interrupt whatever delicate ritual is in progress. One of the whisperers reaches into a sleeve and produces a tiny jade box. With great care, she opens it, revealing a cricket nestled on a bed of lotus petals. The insect doesn't move. Then, as she breathes out slowly, it begins to chirp, faint at first, then louder, steadier. Coincidence? Probably, unless it isn't. Cricket. Whisperers were known for their ability to awaken silent crickets, soothe anxious ones, and even guide the rhythm of chirps through vocal toning. Some whispered into cages, others chanted low vibrations, and many believed these interactions weren't just calming, they were communicative. Fringe? Absolutely. But fascinating. You hear one courtier say, "This cricket guards my dreams. If it falls silent, I wake." Another nods, recounting how her mother swore a certain cricket chirped more intensely when she had bad thoughts, like a spiritual smoke alarm. Historians still argue whether the whisperers had any measurable influence, or whether they were just particularly persuasive insect therapists. But within these walls their talents were revered. The emperor himself often consulted them, not just for the health of his crickets, but for dreams, omens, and guidance. Some were treated like seers. You lean in as one elder whispers to a gourd, "Speak clearly tonight. He needs answers." The gourd trembles slightly, as if responding. You're not even trying to rationalize anymore. You're just here for the ride. A scholar nearby tells you of an ancient belief. Crickets were messengers between the waking world and the spirit realm. Their songs were thought to carry thoughts back and forth, especially during the 7th month of the lunar calendar, when the veil between realms thinned. One Qing dynasty journal even claims a whisper could use crickets to influence dreams, encouraging certain memories to rise or calming troubled minds before sleep. It said a favored concubine once requested a forgiving sounding cricket be placed beside her after a quarrel with the emperor. He dreamed of reconciliation. They made peace the next morning. Coincidence? Maybe, but compelling. The room is full of little rituals like that. One whisperer traces her finger in a spiral on the cage lid before every sleep cycle. Another taps 3 times, no more, no less. One insists on placing a droplet of dew from a specific leaf over the cricket's resting mat, so it knows the day has ended. He says, There's even a belief that certain crickets absorb the personality of their keeper. A calm master produces a calm song. An anxious keeper? Erratic chirps. You look around, suddenly wondering if this entire palace is one great mirror of tone dot. And then there's the weirdest tale, yet a half-forgotten legend from the Yuan dynasty. It tells of a whisperer who trained her cricket to chirp in Morse-like pulses, each one representing the name of an ancestor. It was her lullaby, her prayer, her connection to those who'd passed. Supposedly, the cricket lived far longer than any average lifespan over 5 years, singing her to sleep every night without fail. Of course, there's no way to prove it, but it feels right somehow, like memory carried on a wing beat. The whispers begin a slow chant now, their voices low and steady, blending with the chirps into a strange, almost musical drone. You feel your body slacken slightly. Your eyelids grow heavy. There's power in repetition, in soft noise, in giving attention to something that usually gets swatted away. You glance down at a simple cage beside you. The cricket inside is silent, curled beneath a folded leaf. You don't disturb it. You just watch, wait, listen. After a moment it shifts, clicks once, then again. Not loud, but clear. One of the whispers leans in and smiles. It knows you're here. You don't reply. You don't have to, because in this room you're not supposed to speak louder than a cricket. By late afternoon, the palace settles into its unique kind of stillness, not sleep, but a hushed pause, a moment to sip bitter tea, to fan yourself in a shaded corner, to breathe in the lingering scent of incense and dust. And in this softness, you step through a narrow courtyard door, past a row of scholars' stones and lotus basins, into a low-ceilinged room that smells faintly of straw and cedar. It isn't gilded. There are no jade figurines, no gold-leafed scrolls. The floors creak softly, the cushions are worn, but the air hums with something quieter than royalty familiarity, comfort, memory. This is a servant's rest chamber, and inside 4 women are seated in a circle, their sleeves rolled up, weaving new straw bedding for the imperial cricket cages. They glance up as you enter, but they don't stop working. One of them, perhaps the oldest, gives a nod and says, "Close the door gently. Please, the babies are sleeping." She doesn't mean actual babies. She means the crickets. You watch as she gently lifts a cage, this one simpler, made of polished wood, unadorned. Inside, a small cricket naps under a curled leaf, twitching a leg now and then like it's chasing something in a dream. You take a seat beside them, and as the quiet weaving continues, a story unfolds. Long before the cricket song reached emperors' ears, it started here in huts and straw-roofed homes, in clay-walled kitchens and quiet village nights. Crickets, you learn, were part of peasant life centuries before they became imperial obsessions. A posh farmer might keep one near his bed to predict the weather. A child might whisper secrets to it, believing it carried them away on tiny, invisible wings. A grandmother might teach lullabies time to the rhythm of a favorite chirp, and slowly the bug stopped being just a sound. It became a presence. People think we keep crickets for sleep, one woman says, her fingers deftly tying knots in fine twine. But sometimes we slap because of them. You smile. It makes sense now why these little creatures would travel up the social ladder. From humble huts to ornate palaces, the sound they made was universal, familiar, like rain on the roof or a heartbeat in the dark. And then something curious happened. As the emperors grew more obsessed, they sent for more crickets. They paid handsomely. And those same villagers who once kept bugs for comfort suddenly found themselves breeding crickets for export to the court. A trade was born. Rural families began building elaborate cages from scraps, drying special cricket feed from beans and herbs, and even naming their most musical bugs. Not for fame, not for art, but because the crickets brought something peaceful into homes that had very little peace. One of the women beside you chuckles. My grandmother had a cricket she named Second Husband, said it listened better than the first one. You laugh with her. You can imagine the old woman muttering at the bug after a hard day, finding in its silent gaze a kind of counsel no human could give. There's a lull now. One of the younger women sets down her weaving, reaches into a cloth pouch, and pulls out a gourd-shaped cage. She tilts it toward you. Inside is a cricket, not especially big, not flashy, but it chirps with a pattern unlike any you've heard before. 3 short bursts. A pause. Then one long trill. It's from my mother's garden, she says. It only sings when I'm nearby. You believe her, and she's not alone. There are countless stories of crickets refusing to chirp in unfamiliar hands, or growing quiet after their owner's death. A legend from the southern provinces tells of a cricket that sat silently for 9 days beside its keeper's grave, then chirped once and died. Historians still argue whether these tales are folklore or fact, but in rooms like this one, truth isn't about science, it's about resonance. What you feel when the lights go out. What you listen for when the house creaks and you can't sleep. You look around at the women still weaving. The oldest one hums quietly, a lullaby that mirrors the rise and fall of the cricket's song, and it hits you. For all the imperial reverence, the scrolls, the silk cages, and the scholarly arguments, this is where the real power began. In modest homes, in simple rooms, with hands that worked all day and sought peace at night, not in wine or in war, but in the rhythmic call of something tiny, persistent, and profoundly present. The bell in the distance signals evening. Time for the cricket cages to return to. The palace bedrooms. The women stand, stretch, and carefully lift their woven mats, handing them off to the waiting servants. Not one cage rattles, not one cricket stirs, because they've been prepared not just as insects, but as companions. As you walk out with them into the lavender twilight, a dozen chirps rise into the air at once. You close your eyes and realize you're not tired. You're calm, like you've remembered something your body always knew but forgot to listen for. A sound that cradles, that anchors, that stays. And tonight, once again, it will return to the bedsides of both emperors and farmers. No judgment, no noise, just song. Evening stretches its long shadow across the palace walls, and everything softens into that peculiar hour where the world isn't quite day, not yet night, a quiet breath between. You follow that breath through the back halls of the forbidden city, past windows now aglow with candlelight, past attendants lighting lanterns with curved brass wands, and you feel it again, the hum, a cricket's chirp, light and pulsing, drifts from one of the guest pavilions, then another from an open-air corridor. One by one, as the sky dims to ink, the palace awakens not with voices, but with a gentle buzzing symphony, not overwhelming, never loud, but present, anchoring, like a gentle tide rolling in. You keep walking, drawn to a quieter corner of the palace. This isn't the main residence, it's more modest, older. You realize it belongs to the retired Empress Dowager. Inside, her servant is preparing her bed. The room is Spartan but elegant. On the bedside table, a weathered, pear-shaped cricket cage. It's not the fanciest you've seen. In fact, it might be the simplest. And yet, when the Empress enters and seats herself beside it, she smiles in a way no gemstone could ever earn. This one was with me when I still wore red robes. She says softly, referring to her wedding day. It chirped for the first time that night. The keeper bows silently and places a small dish of ground millet and honey in the cage. A fresh leaf, too just slightly damp. The cricket stirs, stretches its wings, and begins to chirp low, warm, familiar. Dynasties may have changed, officials may have come and gone, but this cricket, it sings the same way it always has. She closes her eyes for a moment and simply listens. It becomes clear to you now. As each ruler ascended the dragon throne, the nature of cricket culture shifted slightly. Emperors shaped trends with their preferences. Some adored deep vibratos, others delicate trills. Some wanted elaborate cages lined with ivory. Others preferred humble wooden gourds strung with red thread. And so the tone of the empire changed, chirp by chirp. During the Tang dynasty, cricket cages were often passed down like family relics. By the Song era, poets praised specific cricket calls as part of seasonal rituals. In the Ming, the focus became refinement, tuning boxes, resonance, chambers, even crossbreeding. The Qing emperors took it a step further, systematizing chirp collections, formalizing cricket caretakers, and regulating the cricket trade. Historians still argue whether these shifts reflected political philosophy or personal eccentricity. One scholar insists the Ming court's obsession with precise tone mirrored its bureaucratic rigidity. Another counters that the Qing love for bold, rhythmic chirps signified a nostalgic return to nature during a time of foreign pressure. You sit with that. The idea that the pitch of a cricket could tell you something about power, about fear, about national identity. In this palace, even sleep had dynastic variations. But it wasn't just the emperors. Royal concubines had favorites. Scholars penned poetry to their insect companions. Eunuchs made side deals for rarer breeds. Even palace cooks, working long into the night, sometimes tucked a cricket cage under the corner of their sleeping mats, just for company. It's strange how universal it all became. The chirp was status, but also solace, a symbol of refinement and also a soft bridge to rural origins. You step back into the corridor. as a bell chimes the 6th hour. Servants fan out across the estate, carrying small wrapped bundles under their arms. Each one contains a cricket cage, freshly cleaned, topped with food and damp moss. These aren't for show. They're tonight's sleep companions. One servant pauses beside you and whispers, "This one's for the prince." He likes the ones that sound like rain. She shakes the cage slightly. Chirp, chirp, chirp. A soft, scattered rhythm. Just like a summer storm on a tiled roof. You follow the servant to the prince's quarters, where the cage is placed gently on a carved stone shelf above the bed. He's already lying under the covers, half asleep, fingers tapping in time to the rhythm of the chirp dot. Every room now has its own signature sound. No two exactly alike. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine the palace from above, not as an empire, but as an orchestra. Each cage a string, each cricket a note. The sound rises and falls as you walk, cresting softly near the Hall of Supreme Harmony, then dipping to a hush near the Imperial Library. There's a pattern here. Almost a score. You pass a scholar scribbling something on rice paper. "I believe," he says without looking up, "that if I map every chirp in the palace tonight, I could trace the mood of the court, perhaps even predict a death or a victory." You don't laugh. You just nod, because by now you believe it. 2. Even in a palace as vast and complex as this, with its politics, alliances, and intrigue, there exists this other world. One made not of power, but of pulse, of wing, of whisper dot, and through it all, the crickets sing dot, not for glory, not for empire, but simply to be heard, to connect. To soothe dot, you find your own resting place now in a side alcove near a silk-screened window. The servant leaves a cage for you too. The chirp is quiet, slow, 3 notes repeated gently like breath. You lie back, listening. The empire sleeps one chirp at a time. Midnight in the Forbidden City doesn't mean silence. It means depth. The sky has turned to ink, but it feels less like darkness and more like velvet draped across the heavens. And under that cover, the palace breathes, slowly, rhythmically. The crickets are fully awake now, not frantic, just present. A wave of soft, scattered chirps rolls from one wing of the palace to the other, like a lullaby caught on the wind. You lie in your alcove, half dreaming, fully listening, and that's when you notice something else. Entirely the cages themselves are singing to dot, not literally, of course, but there's music in the material. The soft buzz of a cricket changes as it echoes inside a gourd versus bamboo versus porcelain. You sit up and peer into the shadowed shelves lining the room. Each one holds a different vessel, some squat and earthy, others tall and hollowed like tiny towers. This is where the true DIY sleep machines lived long before electricity. You run your fingers along one, a gourd cage polished smooth, its surface lacquered with pine resin. The opening is lined with silk thread to prevent sound distortion. Inside, the cricket chirps with a subtle reverb, as though you're hearing it in a temple hall. Another cage, made of bone-thin strips of red bamboo, offers a crisp, dry tone, like the difference between a cello and a harpsichord. One soothes. The other focuses dot palace attendants, many of them trained in tone matching, would select the proper cage depending on the emperor's mood. Tired but anxious, gourd for warmth. Restless but unfocused, bamboo for sharpness. One page from a Qing Iris sleep manual reads, "Cage choice is as vital as food. Sound must dress the air like silk dresses the body." You love that. But there's more to it. These cages weren't just about acoustics. They were part of sleep rituals, a series of nighttime tasks performed with the precision of tea ceremonies. First, the cricket's cage was gently dusted with a goat hair brush. Then, a small bowl of dew collected from specific leaves before sunrise was placed beside it. Finally, a leaf was chosen for shade, not randomly, but based on the day of the lunar cycle. It wasn't superstition. It was respect. You wander now through a quiet corridor where some of these sleep rituals are being performed in slow, graceful movements. A servant kneels beside a cage, gently fanning it with a peacock feather, not for air, but to mimic a forest breeze. The cricket adjusts its song slightly higher now, a tremble in the pitch. In the next room, a court physician has placed 3 cages in a triangular formation around a sleeping noblewoman. Each chirps at a different tone. Together they create a layered soundscape designed to guide the mind from tension to rest. It's practically sound therapy. Centuries before white noise machines or ASMR, the palace was fine-tuning insect harmonics to put its highest-ranking citizens to sleep. Historians still argue whether these setups were based on real science or placebo, but considering the level of detail, the care in matching sound, tone, humidity, and cage position, it's hard to dismiss it as mere tradition. One especially fascinating design stands in the center of the sleep chamber, a resonance tower. It looks like a miniature pagoda, maybe 2 feet tall, with hollow chambers on each level. Each floor houses a different cricket. As sound travels upward, it reverberates, layering on itself. You sit before it and feel the hum in your ribs. A sleeping guard nearby stirs, sighs, and turns over with a smile. The tower is doing its work. Then comes the fringe detail. Some claimed the cages could be attuned not just to crickets, but to people. That over time, a cage used consistently near the same sleeper would begin to remember their energy and amplify it. One court lady even swore that after her favorite cage was lost, no cricket ever sounded right again. They all felt foreign. You lean against a cool stone now, your own cage gently chirping beside you. Its sound isn't loud. It's barely more than a whisper, but the frequency is perfect. You feel it in your spine, and your teeth, not intrusive, just there. A subtle thread tying your body to the stillness around you. A breeze shifts the silk curtain near your head, and it brushes your cheek. You could almost believe the cricket knows it's bedtime, that it's playing its part. No one speaks in this part of the palace. They don't have to. The sound speaks for everyone. You start to wonder, what's your tone? Would a cricket placed at your bedside learn your breathing? Match it? Carry it forward when your mind drifts too far into worry. Because that's what these crickets are doing, not just singing. They're carrying carrying you gently from one moment to the next, from tension to quiet, from awareness to sleep. You lie back down now, not because you're ordered to, but because your body says now, the sound is right. The moment is right. The air is thick with peace. You exhale and let the cricket continue. Sometime past midnight, you find yourself in one of the quieter wings of the Forbidden City. The lights are low. The silk curtains barely stir. The air here is thicker, like it holds secrets, like every breath must be measured. You've entered the world of cricket etiquette. That's right. Even crickets, these tiny, chirping companions of emperors, came with their own protocol. You pass a series of small, lacquered screens separating sleeping chambers. Behind one, a young concubine sleeps peacefully, her cricket cage placed precisely 2 finger widths from her head. The string holding the cage is knotted in a pattern indicating favor. One servant told you earlier, 2 knots, 1 blessing. 3 knots, the emperor visits. You didn't ask what 4 knots meant. In the Forbidden City, placement meant everything. Which cricket went where, in whose quarters, how loud, what tone, which cage, none of it was accidental. Even a tiny shift in ritual could mean a lot. And sometimes it did. You remember the story of Consort Lin, a favorite of the Yongjing Emperor. Her cricket stopped chirping for 2 nights in a row. Unusual, but not unheard of. Still, the attendants whispered. Bad omen, they said. The emperor, already superstitious, avoided her room for a week. By the time the cricket began chirping again, it was too late. Her favor had faded. Historians still debate whether it was the cricket that caused her fall from grace, or merely a symptom of it. But either way, she was out, replaced by another whose cricket sang like spring rain. Yes, the politics of chirps. You enter a room, now used by eunuch advisors. 3 sleep mats, 3 cages, all arranged identically. But one chirps just a little louder than the others. That man, presumably, has more pull. It's unspoken, but it's known that, in some cases, crickets were even gifted to demonstrate status. A perfectly tuned, hand-raised cricket in a custom cage might earn you an audience with a prince. Refusing a cricket gift? Political suicide. And there were rules. So many rules. Crickets had to be presented with 2 hands. Never with your left hand alone. That implied disrespect. When entering the emperor's chamber with a cage, you were to hold it at chest level, bow 3 times, and never let it chirp. During a proclamation, if it did, you'd best hope your next assignment involves rice fields and not dungeons. You pause at a scroll mounted on the wall. It's titled The 10 Harmonies of Night at Qing Era, Manual of Proper Cricket Protocol. You skim the lines. Do not place 2 crickets with competing tones in the same wing unless ordered. Do not interrupt the song with human music. Do not force a cricket to sing with flame or draft. A silent cricket must be heard without judgment. That last one lands hard. Silent cricket must be heard without judgment. You let the idea sit in your chest for a moment. You don't have to make sound to be valuable. You don't have to perform. Sometimes your presence is enough. And yet, silence wasn't always benign in the palace. A chirping cricket meant life, health, balance. A quiet cricket could suggest death, change, betrayal, you step into another chamber, this one more opulent. A rare one. The Emperor's sleep chamber when traveling. Here, the cages are different, larger, hung on curved gold stands. Each has a delicate tag hanging beneath it, naming the cricket and its assigned time of evening. Yes, crickets were scheduled, rotated, like guards, their songs staggered to create a sequence, a kind of slow lullaby hourglass that eased the Emperor from waking thought into full sleep. You find tonight's current singer, Shallow Stream, chirping slowly, calmly, as if it knows it's the 4th hour and things must settle now. But there's something deeper going on here, politics embedded. In ritual, there's an account from the late Ming era where a favored minister deliberately altered another courtier's cricket cage location by 1 foot. Subtle, seemingly meaningless. But in the palace, that meant something. That night, the Emperor's rest was uneasy. The chirps were off rhythm. He asked questions. Eventually, the shift was discovered. The minister was quietly reassigned to the provinces. And that's the thing about the Forbidden City. Nothing is just a detail. Not in the dark. Not when sleep is a battleground. Even bedtime had consequences. Crickets also acted as messengers. A rare practice, mostly among concubines or palace staff, involved hiding tiny written notes beneath a cricket's leaf or food tray. If the message made it past inspection, it could be delivered across wings, secrets cloaked in chirps. One fringe. Tale tells of a love note carried this way, disguised as a feeding instruction and delivered to a court painter, who then painted his secret muse into the background of a mural. No one noticed for decades. You can't help but smile at the idea. A cricket as Cupid, buzzing across imperial politics on 6 legs and a mission. Now, back in your own alcove, you hear the gentle murmur of one official reprimanding a younger attendant, too close to the pillar. The tone won't reflect properly. He adjusts the cage by inches. The chirp clears instantly. Perfect. You lie back again, understanding now just how delicately balanced this all is. How etiquette, usually rigid and cold, takes on a strangely tender quality here, because it's not about control. It's about harmony, not just where the cricket sings, but how and why, and for whom you let the thoughts unravel like silk, slipping from your fingers, and again you sleep, not because the palace demands it, but because the crickets permit it. The hour grows late, past the time for dreams, past even the time for restless stirrings under silk sheets. Now only the truest sleepers remain, floating somewhere between breath and silence. And yet, in the far wing of the palace, something stirs. You hear it not in volume, but in absence. One of the crickets has stopped chirping at first. You think it's nothing, an adjustment, a pause. But the nearby servant stiffens. He walks slowly to the cage, peers inside, and his shoulders sink. The cricket has died. This wasn't just any cricket. This one, nicknamed Ghost Willow, had belonged to a favored concubine of the Emperor. For over 2 years, its soft, rippling trill had signaled her presence in the palace. Its song had been a signature, her audible identity. And now, silence. The servant removes the cage gently with both hands. No drama, just a shift in the air. The silence seems heavier now, the kind of quiet that lingers too long in the corners of a room. You follow quietly. No one speaks. The procession moves down a narrow corridor to a small, enclosed garden used for private ceremonies. Moonlight reveals patches of moss, river stones, and one small altar. This is where they perform the cricket morning ritual. Yes, that was a thing in the palace. When a cricket of high value, personal or political died, it was sometimes given a ceremonial farewell. Not every insect earned it, but some had become too intertwined with the people they soothed to be discarded like trash. The servant places the tiny body in a small lacquered box. A layer of gossamer thin silk wraps it like a shroud. 2 grains of millet, a drop of honey water, and a sliver of green leaf are added beside it. These were the traditional offerings, symbolizing sustenance in the next realm, and then comes the incense. 1 stick, lit and placed upright in a ceramic holder. The smoke rises in a perfect spiral. The concubine arrives not in grand robes, but in a simple sleeping gown. She kneels beside the altar, touches the cage once, and whispers something no one else hears. Historians still argue whether these mourning practices were common or reserved for only the most devoted. Some records suggest they were personal choices, an act of grief rather than policy. Others point to scrolls that document cricket lifespans beside court appointments, indicating a closer relationship between person and chirp than most would expect. In one famous tale, Emperor Xuanzong of Tang reportedly built a miniature shrine for a cricket that had sung through a particularly difficult winter. It survived what others did not, he supposedly said, and so it shall be honored. Some laugh at these stories, but as you watch the concubine rise, eyes glistening, you understand. Grief isn't about size, it's about presence and absence. That cricket had been her companion, her comfort, perhaps her only constant in a world of shifting favor and formal. Smiles. She turns and walks away. No farewell, no audience. The servant stays behind, places the silk-wrapped box in a small stone basin at the garden's edge. Then, without pomp, he covers it with earth. A burial as soft as breath. Nearby, another servant removes the cage from her sleeping chamber, but not to discard it, to repurpose it. It will be cleaned, polished, perhaps even repaired if needed. In time, it will house another, not as a replacement, but as a continuation. And still, even now, the other crickets sing. Not louder, not sadder, just as they always have. Steady, indifferent, eternal. You sit on a stone bench under a flowering plum tree. A gourd cage hangs from a branch above. Inside, a cricket chirps with a slight irregularity, like it's hesitating between notes. You close your eyes and let it play. It reminds you, life here is so fragile. A single step, a misplaced sigh, a silent insect, any of it could ripple through the palace like a cracked mirror. And yet, there's peace in that fragility, a beauty in the awareness that nothing lasts. Not status, not sound, not even sleep. You overhear 2 servants speaking in hushed tones nearby. One mentions how the emperor, upon hearing of ghost willows passing, simply nodded. It has done its work, he said. Now it rests. No mourning, no decree. Just acknowledgment, and somehow that feels right, the palace doesn't stop. It never has, but it remembers, in its own way. A shift in chirp rhythm. A cage left empty for a night. A leaf untouched. Somewhere someone will write a poem about this cricket. Maybe they'll exaggerate. Maybe they'll claim it chirped in time with the stars, or held the emperor's dreams in its song. And maybe that's not true, or maybe it is because in this place truth hums just beneath the surface, small, rhythmic, often overlooked, much like a cricket. The moon hangs lower now, hovering just above the roofline of the hall of tranquil longevity, casting its light like a soft spell over the tiled courtyards and winding stone paths. You move slowly, quietly, like the whole palace has entered a trance, but you're not sleepy. Not exactly. You're floating, and as you round the next garden path, you feel tension in the air, not unrest, but contrast. You've crossed into a part of the palace rarely walked by locals, a place where tension once ran high, and where crickets oddly enough played an unexpectedly defiant role. This is where the foreigners came, the Jesuits, the merchants, the envoys from kingdoms far beyond the Middle Kingdom's borders. And with them came disbelief, amusement, even mockery. You keep bugs in boxes, to fall asleep? One envoy once scoffed, according to a journal you overheard read aloud by a scholar earlier. We use brandy for that? The court had tolerated them, smiled politely. But in the background, something interesting happened. Emperors and high officials doubled down on their cricket culture, not out of stubbornness, out of pride, and maybe out of identity. Cricket culture, suddenly questioned by outsiders, became more than just a personal comfort. It became a symbol of refinement, of depth, of listening where others only heard noise. You sit now in the emperor's private study. An imported globe rests in the corner, near a stack of translated European texts. A harp-shaped timepiece ticks softly on a shelf, but front and center there's still a cricket cage. Tonight's guest, according to the notes left beside it, is Autumn Whisperer, hand-caught by a monk, known for its deep, echoing tone. It hums now like a cello wrapped in fog. This juxtaposition wasn't accidental. Emperors often presented crickets to foreign guests, not as novelties, but as proof of China's sophisticated sensibilities. You listen with your eyes, one emperor allegedly told a Portuguese visitor. We listen with our bones. There's an account half historical, half apocryphal, of a visiting European ambassador trying to present a mechanical music box to the court. It played a delicate waltz, ears turning, tones crisp. The emperor smiled, listened politely, then produced a cricket cage and said, "Ours does not wind down." That story might be exaggerated, but it's told with affection, as if the cricket stood not just for China's preferences, but its patience. Historians still argue whether this was cultural posturing or genuine defensiveness. Maybe it was both. Maybe that's how identity works. You don't notice it until someone laughs at it, and then you hold it tighter than ever. But it wasn't always laughter. some outsiders were charmed. One Jesuit priest wrote in his letters home that the cricket's song was a language I cannot translate, but understand fully in sleep. Another described the cages as art pieces housing symphonies performed by wings. Even Marco Polo allegedly mentioned the Chinese fascination with night-singing insects, although his details were vague and most likely colored by later embellishments. You rise from the study and move into the old guest quarters, where faded records list the names of visitors long gone. One particularly worn entry reads, Dutch East India delegate refused tea, accepted gourd with cricket smiled for first time. There's poetry in that dot, and yet the crickets didn't only reflect cultural pride. They reflected isolation, too. During the Qing dynasty's more insular years, when foreign influence was viewed with increasing suspicion, the cricket became a kind of symbolic protector of tradition. As the world modernized inside these walls, six-legged singers carried centuries of calm. An old tutor once said, when the stars fall and the ships arrive, let the cricket chirp on. It knows no flag. You sit again under a moon gate, listening to that chirp now. Same tone, same rhythm, same cradle of rest. Whether the palace was open or closed, whether diplomats were welcome or dismissed, the cricket stayed. Unbothered. One fringe theory you hear whispered during a late-night conversation with the groundskeeper. Crickets were used to mask spy movements. Their song, consistent and predictable, could cover the sound of footsteps if one learned to pace in time. It's likely nonsense, but in a palace where chirps meant status, sleep, and signals, who's to say? And even beyond diplomacy and deception, there was the genuine affection. Several foreign visitors actually took cricket cages home with them, delicate bamboo creations tucked into silk-lined trunks. Some wrote about struggling to recreate the experience. Mine refused to sing, one lamented. Perhaps it missed China. Another wrote, I find myself listening at night, long after the cage is empty. You understand that now, because this sound the sound of one. Cricket chirping in the dark isn't bound by language or empire. It speaks to something older, quieter, simpler. You breathe slowly, matching the rhythm. The hum threads itself into your ears, into your shoulders, into your spine. There's no border in that sound, no crown, no flag, just rest. And somewhere in the palace the emperor sleeps, not because the world outside is calm, but because the sound inside is, because some truths don't need to shout, some just chirp. The night is at its quietest now, so still, it feels like time itself is holding its breath. You walk slowly along the edge of the imperial pond, where moonlight drapes the water like silk, silver, and still. In the shadows of the willows, the crickets are still singing. Slower now, lower. Their chirps stretch longer, as if the insects are tired too, winding down just like the rest of the palace. You've been walking through the forbidden city for hours, and still the sound holds. You gently, not repeating itself, but evolving, less structured now, less like performance, more like memory. You take a seat beneath a flowering tree and listen, and you start to realize you're hearing some of the last chirps, not just of the night, but of an era, the golden age of cricket culture. Like all things was not eternal. You wander next into a rarely visited wing of the palace, its floorboards groaning slightly beneath your feet. This part of the Forbidden City is quiet in a different way, abandoned. The rooms hold dust instead of incense, cobwebs instead of silk, but the cages are still here, stacked neatly in cabinets, some carved, some cracked, all emptied at once. This was the private collection of a minor Qing prince, a man who, legend says, spent more time with his crickets than his court duties. He named them like sons, fed them herbs imported from the south, and supposedly kept a journal of their dreams. Of course, no one really believes that, but you want. He died without an heir, and the crickets, no one knows. Some say they were released into the gardens. Others say they simply went quiet, one by one, until the sound was gone. You feel a melancholy now, not sorrow, just stillness. This practice, this strange, beautiful, meticulous tradition, didn't disappear all at once, but slowly, with every emperor who chose to sleep to silence instead of song, with every cage left unopened, with every servant who no longer knew which leaf was best for which tone. The final nail came, perhaps, in the 20th century, as the imperial era ended, as war and reform swept through China, as electric lights replaced candles and radios replaced crickets. The cages were packed away or sold or forgotten. Historians still argue whether it was modernity or practicality that ended the cricket's reign. But you don't need an answer. You can hear it in the quiet corners of this old wing, in the faint memory of chirps that used to echo off the painted beams. And yet, not everything is lost. Cricket culture still survives in small ways. In the hutongs of Beijing, old men still carry tiny gourds at their belts, the chirping more a heartbeat than a hobby. In rural towns, children still coax crickets into song with leaves and soft taps, learning to listen before they learn to read. And in museums, dusty but reverent, the cages remain, preserved, admired, the artifacts of a lullaby. Even in this palace, there are whispers of return. You saw it, didn't you? The attendants who still prepare the food, the scholar who maps the songs, the concubine who whispered goodbye to her fallen companion. Some legacies don't vanish. They fade, then wait. And sometimes, when the night is quiet enough, they return. You sit back now, letting that thought settle like mist across your chest. The chirps are faint, but still there, somewhere in the garden, somewhere near the pond. One long, low trill, then silence, then another, softer, then nothing. It's not that the crickets are gone, they've simply gone still, and it's your turn. To still yourself. To listen. To carry the echo of wings and wood and wind into your own sleep. Let them lull you one more time. Like they did for the emperors, like they did for lovers and scholars and whisperers and warriors. Not because you need rest, but because you deserve peace. Now, let's slow everything down. You've walked across stone courtyards and slept beneath silken banners. You've listened to crickets sing in bamboo cages watched servants prepare sleeping rituals with more care than most people give to waking. You've seen how the tiniest sound repeating, rhythmic, can carry the weight of an entire empire's dreams. Let your breath settle now. Inhale slowly. Hold it just a moment, then let it out. There's nothing more to follow. No more rooms to explore. No more secret gardens to find. The palace is gone still. Let your body do the same. Your hands are warm. Your eyelids are soft. And somewhere, just at the edge of your hearing, a cricket is still singing. Not for attention. Not even for you. Just because that's what it does, and maybe that's the lesson tonight. That rest doesn't always come from silence. It comes from finding a sound steady enough to trust, small enough to fit inside your breathing, familiar enough to let your thoughts drift without clinging. The emperors knew it. Now you do too. So sleep. Sleep in a palace that once ruled the world, lulled not by thunder, but by the most delicate music earth has ever made. A lullaby with legs, a whisper in the dark. A song you'll never forget. Good night.